Halloween. It's just a children's holiday about candy, right? Maybe you haven't put much thought into it. Maybe it's just something you've joined into culturally, and that's all the thought you've put into it. And maybe you've always had some reticence about participating in it, but you aren't sure why. As a Christian, have you considered how you should participate in Halloween? Is there a way to redeem this holiday from its pagan origins? Join us today as we discuss this ever-popular, secular day of worship.
I'm more tired today than I was last time.
Me too.
Probably because we all been recovered from being sick a little bit, as you can tell by my voice. All right, so starting this thing off, we are talking about Halloween. Halloween is coming up pretty soon. It is, I think, did I hear that it's the, next to Christmas, I think it's the highest grossing day for merchants in, did I hear that? Am I right on that?
They do 2006, it was like nearly $5 billion.
Woo-ha.
Yeah.
They do start advertising it pretty early on.
Yeah.
Middle of the summer, all of a sudden everything
Well,
in stores is Halloween related.
It's an extra interesting topic for us because we live obviously here in Calaveras County, and from what I understand, the Witch Walk's not going again, but they're calling it the Gathering now, right?
Yep.
From my understanding is that when the Witch Walk was going, and I assume it'll be the same thing with the Gathering, that it is the second largest witch gathering celebration in the entire country after the one that happens in Salem, Massachusetts. And it brings people up from the Bay Area. I've never been to it even once. I didn't realize how big it was, but according to the developers of the day, they say it's just a huge day. Like, you know what it's like at Irish Days or Christmas Open House in Murphy's. It's one of those sort of a days.
25,000 people.
Yeah, and there's always been kind of an occult presence around this area. Even when I was a little kid, Love Creek was kind of famous for that. Up the road a little bit, and now that I'm a pastor, I don't know if this is always going on or just because I'm a pastor, but I regularly get calls from the community, people talking about weird paranormal activity, and so yeah, for whatever it's worth, this area at least has some interaction on this. So yeah, so we had thought it'd be cool to talk about Halloween and talk about its origins, and should Christians be involved in Halloween? We all got kids and such, and so you want me to start off with a little history frame, and then
Let's get after
a
it.
little history of who the pagan origins.
But all right, so we are we're talking about Halloween, and so I mean I can throw out there just the basic history of what it is. And there's probably two streams of where it comes from. I mean, it goes all the way back to, around AD 600, Pope Boniface IV. In May of that year, 609, I think it was, in May of that year, he dedicated the Pantheon, the pagan temple in Rome, and he dedicated it to Mary and all of the saints. And then he declared that dedication day was going to be a day to remember all of the saints, to pray to all of the saints, remember the departed dead. And then fast forward, a few hundred years later, and it would have been, so that was Boniface IV, then it would have been Gregory IV in the late 800s. He moved the day, All Saints' Day, over to November 1st, and so there was Hallowed Eve, All Hallows Eve, on October the 31st. And that was done, and we could even talk about this motive because there's some coolness in this motive, but that was done because that October the 31st in Celtic tradition is Samhain, right? So it's a Druidic festival, one of their two great festivals, and it is a festival where you're honoring the dead, and the veil is thin, or so the Celts thought, and the dead walk the earth, and there's interactions with the dead. And so there was this kind of idea of like, well, we're going to Christianize and we're going to take over that. And so we can talk about both of those traditions. I'm assuming we will talk about both those traditions, the Catholic tradition and what that involves with purgatory and our relationships to the departed, and the similarities, or maybe lack thereof, I guess we'll find out, between the Celtic tradition. And then that made its way to America in the mid-1800s through all kinds of Irish immigrants who brought it along, and they brought the traditions of Halloween with them. And Halloween is one of those holidays, probably more than almost any other holiday, that just gathers all kinds of traditions and throws them into one gigantic pot. And
Sounds witchy.
yeah, one giant black cauldron, right? Stirs it all up.
Yeah.
Bat wings, you know.
Yeah. Newt.
I have new.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and today it's this unbelievably epically popular holiday everybody's involved in. So that is the briefest possible history of the date that we celebrate.
Yeah, so I have a quick question. So before we talk about what necessarily witchcraft is, I kind of want to talk about did Druids and the origins of witchcraft in Druidic practice and the Celts even exist? Did Druids exist? The reason I'm asking is because I was reading that article by James Jordan, and he says some people don't even think that the Druids existed, created or made up by neo-pagans.
Well, you have to take it up with Caesar in his commentaries and with Tacitus.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, Caesar in his commentaries says absolutely the Druids exist and that they were soaking their altars in the blood of human sacrifices. And yeah, I didn't read that. I don't think I read that article from James Jordan. Or maybe
It was the one you sent out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't read it very thoroughly. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at least to those sacrifice people, the Druids probably felt pretty real.
Yeah. I mean, they're epically famous, and they would do this even on this night. You know, they would the Wicker Man, and they would fill them with prisoners and burn massive amounts of people alive. If they ran out of prisoners, they'd just take children and women, whoever they wanted. So, yeah, I mean, they were the Celts, and I guess a little more history. The Celts in general, you know, anthropologists. They're that same Aryan people that first came into the Indus River Valley and wiped out that peaceful people. They made their way across, Eurasia and ended up there. And so there's a lot of similarities between, Savitri and various Indian gods and Carnuño. Savitri wouldn't be Carnuños, but there's similarities between the gods of eventually the Aryan Celtic people and the Aryans who were down in India. So, you think of the Kalis type goddesses that eventually ended up in India. Carnuños, very bloodthirsty. The forest god. I forget what the Indians' forest god was called, but the horned god they call him. If you ever read Eagle the Ninth, so yeah, they were a real people, and they were incredibly violent and incredibly satanic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that solves it. No Halloween.
Yeah.
No. I guess show of hands when we start. How many? I haven't really polled everybody here. Pro Halloween, not pro Halloween.
Yes.
Yeah.
I am not pro Halloween.
Not pro Halloween.
No, not pro Halloween.
Anybody? I mean, these two didn't celebrate Halloween growing up. We did Reformation Day. Did you? Were you a Halloween guy growing up? Or?
Yeah, like
You're a Halloweener?
I was a Halloweener.
Yeah.
And it wasn't any, like, it wasn't witches and stuff like that, at least when I was growing up, like, dress up as Indiana Jones and stuff like that. That's what I remember, but I only did Halloween, like, 2 or 3 times. So, growing up in middle school and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well,
I
is
am
Indiana
not
Jones-
Right. Yeah, I'm not
Satan
pro.
worship, blood and gore, revelry. I'm not pro that, but I am pro take Halloween, which I think is what, and we'll get into this, what we do in our community with Reformation Day.
Yeah.
But yeah, so no, not pro Halloween.
Are you okay with the branding of Halloween? Or you want to change
What do you mean?
just the name Halloween? Would you want to take that day and say, yeah, we celebrate Halloween? I know it's kind of a nuanced
I don't
question,
know.
but
I think you could.
okay,
I don't know if that's what I want,
yeah,
but yeah.
interesting. Okay,
I'm just sitting here. I didn't prep for this, but I'm just thinking about this. We all are used to the idea of meta narratives. This is a podcast about culture. Like, do we know what meta narratives are? Somebody want to explain?
Let's explain it for the
Yeah, what-
viewers.
What would be when we say that cultures have meta narratives? What are we kind of getting at? We're getting at this idea that cultures build into their culture symbols, and that the symbols stand for something. So, like traditionally in the West, what are evil symbols?
Yeah.
In the West, I mean, they're going to talk about the relation to Halloween, but the pentagram and stuff has always been a pagan symbol, like the goat head.
Witches,
Witches,
dragons, ogres.
vampires.
Yeah, ogres, werewolves, all the.
Yeah.
Did you say vampires?
Yeah, vampires. And then you think about
Twilight.
like in modern times where we obviously see this kind of like this trying to change that symbolism. And I don't know if this addresses your question about whether we should use the term Halloween or not, but I mean, when you guys were little kids, Dragon Tales, the dragons.
love
there.
Dragon Tales.
Yeah, Dragon's great. And Twilight, you got some good vampires, and there's
There's a
this
lot of messing with meta narrative.
right, yeah, messing with meta narrative. Shrek is an ogre, but he's a good ogre.
Right.
Not too many generations ago, there's no such thing as a good ogre.
Right.
Go get a good vampire.
But then at the same time, like dragons are in the Bible. Like you can make an argument, at least people do that.
Yeah.
That like seraphim are described as dragons, right? And so, which would mean, even though in the West dragons are a symbol of like guile and destruction and evil, like maybe that's because of the demons that moved west with people and enslaved nations, and eventually were driven out when Christianity moved west. But we actually do need to retake those and start treating dragons like they are, like which is just a symbol for angels, and there are actually good dragons.
So should we train them?
And ride them and saddle them.
Like,
and
is that-
go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because they're not. That would be so. There's kind of like a couple different views on dragons, right? Like one, they're animals,
Yeah.
just extinct lizards. In which case, heck yeah,
Yeah.
they were around.
seriously.
Yeah, we'd be riding them.
Yeah.
Well, we've had discussions of, say, Tolkien and Lewis.
Right.
So Tolkien tended to keep things within their lanes throughout history, right? But Lewis was actually fine or more comfortable with taking something and then redesigning
Right.
it.
Right.
Narnia.
Yeah.
All those different creatures in the
All the
Saturn.
Greek gods.
Pagan
Yeah.
sex gods.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bacchus.
Bacchus.
Yeah.
Right.
Silenus and his little
Right.
fat donkey.
And we all love Narnia.
Bacchus. Oh.
We all love
Yeah.
Bacchus and Narnia.
Yeah.
Oh,
The
yeah,
Space
yeah.
Trilogy.
Yeah.
Yep.
So is that kind of all of that roundabout? Is that kind of your question? Like how much of Halloween? So show of hands, are we all kind of agreed with the idea of like it would be Christian jobs to go forth and conquer and take days back? That devil doesn't get a day. He doesn't get any day in the
Of
calendar.
course, whether or not we think Halloween is the thing to be taken over on that day, you don't want to give that day of October to
Right.
the other side. Yeah.
So
But
that your question with the name, like how much of Halloween is redeemable and how much
Yeah.
just needs to be
needs to
burned?
be- yeah.
Yeah.
sacked and replaced.
Is it so much gone that we just need to get rid of the name entirely? And the same thing could be asked with Christmas. Christmas has its roots in like a Christian story, obviously the Christian story, but it also has a bunch of other nasty, weird stuff that goes along with it. Like Santa Claus and some of his stuff, and
Except when he punched Arius out.
Yeah, except when he punched Arius. That's cool.
Historical Santa.
Pretty legit.
Right.
Right. There's weird stuff that goes with Christmas sometimes.
Yeah, Smart to Pete,
that?
Black Peter.
Oh, yeah.
Smart
Yeah.
to Pete.
Even when there's,
The Office.
through history, there's been dying culture.
Historical one.
So, like, the Puritans really did not like Christmas
Right.
for very specific reasons. A lot of times because it decayed to such a point where they just wanted to be done with it.
Yeah.
They disliked they disliked Christmas for the same reason that we potentially dislike Mardi Gras or
Right.
maybe some practices of Halloween. It's chaotic. It's
Hedonism.
hedonism.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
drunken revelry.
Yeah, there would be an instance where pagans completely co-opted and took over a Christian calendar day.
Right. Yeah.
So is the question: can we co-opt and take over the pagan day?
100%.
Christian imperialism.
We can, but if you're asking, like, is it is it like the example of the unknown God in the Bible, where we can associate something that is true with an existence of something in the pagan world? I am not convinced of that at this point. I don't think there's enough. I don't think there's enough truth in what Halloween originally stands for, and even what it still stands for, to be converted that way, or to be perspectively shifted. I don't think there's. Well, I
Would
think
that be the word, like redeeming the day? Redeemed.
No, because I think the day can be redeemed, and even some concepts along with it. But as it stands right now, I don't think Halloween should be redeemed. I think Halloween should be cast in the lake of fire and replaced. Like, at least in my current position, I haven't been convinced.
Maybe
otherwise.
a way we could talk about this is ways to not redeem the day. With prime example maybe being the Roman Catholic Church. Anyone have any comments on that? You kind of brought it up earlier. That's why maybe I'm bringing it up now.
Yeah, I mean,
Gregory and
Can someone
Boniface.
tell me that story?
yeah. Well, just I mean the idea that without trying to assign motives to people, but
But to assign motives.
right.
It's like saying no offense before something. But you're definitely going to offend me.
Right. I with all apologies to all my marvelous Catholic friends out there, but you know, I'm a Protestant pastor, so I'm not down with that jiggy fang. I'm not down with like praying to saints, and I could see where in an effort to conquer pagan Europe long ago, you would do things like look at the Pantheon, this great temple devoted to all of the gods of Rome, and you would say, well, we're going to take this thing over, we're going to make it a church, right? And we're going to devote it to all the departed saints. And when you got a lot of pagans who are coming in and they're barely converted, if at all, they don't understand what's going on, and they're like, well, I still want to worship, my gods. And you're like, well, why don't you just pray to these saints, right? Pray to these saints and...
You like beer?
Yeah.
It's my gods. See, I hope jokes like that land with our audience.
Great.
Because that's a reference.
So
I'm glad.
It might not. If you don't get the reference, you're uncultured. You need to go watch more
Tune
good
in
films.
next week.
You need to watch our podcast more often.
Yeah.
No.
To become part of a true culture.
Yeah.
To become cultured. Yeah.
But yeah, so it was a way, I think, to try to baptize a pagan Europe, and just over time it just devolved. I mean, that's not even any big slur on the Catholic Church, because good gravy, how much has Protestantism devolved? Like, I don't want anything to do with vast swaths of Protestantism.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
do you think part of why they chose to do that, they mean the Catholic Church, why they chose to try to redeem the Halloween in the way that they did, or All Hallows Eve, is just because they, pray and ask for assistance from saints, and they because of that relationship of how they view that, that it's just not all that different from the pagans' idea of relating to ancestors, relating to the dead. And if it's just too similar, where they thought, oh, it's so similar we could just co-opt it, when really I don't think that practice is right in the first place, and so that's why it failed.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
totally.
Maybe along the same lines, I was thinking last night, in church history with like church music, there's a fantastic example of the church trying to bring things in, it being too confusing. The church tried to implement a piano into worship, and they couldn't do it, because the only time that culture used a piano was in a brothel, and having
All Souls Night, okay, pianos.
yeah, no, absolutely not. So
Okay, Oliver Cromwell.
Yeah, right. So people were coming into worship and you're like, oh okay. Oh no.
Oh, it's one of those places.
Right. Why is the music like that?
They weren't playing honky tonk.
Right. Well, they probably were. I don't
missed
know.
it. Is this a true story?
Yeah, this is an absolutely true story.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
The church tried to bring a piano in, and people couldn't
Didn't
Couldn't
like it
handle
because
it
they
at first.
associated it
because
with the
they're
Bordel.
new converts coming into worship and be like, "What is this?
Interesting.
We can do this and that." No, and I think that's probably how the Catholic Church messed up is because. For new Christians, you can't, if they say this meat has been sacrificed to idols, you say, I have no problem eating meat sacrificed to idols. It's for you, so you don't get confused. I mean, it's just meat.
Right.
I'm not going to use the piano because for your sake, right?
Right.
Even though I could.
Even though I could,
Right.
it's too confusing at this point.
First disassociate that.
Well, I think that's probably why the blending with All Saints Day and Halloween and such with Samhain and like Celtic festivals was so simple because it really kind of was the same thing that the pagans were doing. Like it was just so simple. I mean, that's where a lot of our traditions even come up from. Like if you're dressing up, to scare demons away from your town because they're walking the earth on the night when the veil is thin between the underworld, right? And it's pretty easy you can just see how it would blend very naturally. You'd be drawn to it if you're like, I've done this my whole life.
I think part of how this
Yeah.
does not equate with, in the Bible with the unknown God situation, with the statue to the unknown God. How this doesn't equate is that that was the attention getter. That was like, all right, hey, you guys already know that this God exists. Now let me tell you how this God says all your other gods are wrong.
Yeah.
Right? And so it wasn't like, let's just co-opt all these gods. It was like, hey, you guys realize there's a God you're missing here. Let me tell you how he actually says all of the other ones are wrong. Right?
Yeah.
So it was the attention getter, it was the in, and then everybody was like, after the in was made, then all the deconstruction had to be done.
Yeah.
It wasn't left. It wasn't co-opted. It had to be deconstructed.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious. So we talk about cultures and whatnot, and so why is it that whether it's pagan or Christian, right, both of these things fall into the same period in the calendar, right? So we're in a physical world. We're on a planet where God designed seasons. So what do the seasons tell us, and what do they stir in us in our thoughts? So when we approach fall, why do pagans in the fall before winter and death, right? And then you go into spring, and then they have their fertility rites,
Right.
right? So we have these cycles, and we come along and we say, oh, well, yeah, I mean, it is going to fall. It's dormancy, it's death even. And so the holiday we choose to put in there and substitute is remembrance for past saints, right? So if I'm not wrong with what you're saying, Ethan, is we don't necessarily need to have that day, maybe just burn it off the face of the earth, but should we, somewhere in the fall season, have a remembrance?
Well, I think, and this is my understanding of how Halloween even relates remotely to Reformation Day, is we are remembering saints, right? We're remembering.
Pause right there and tell, in case people don't know what Reformation Day is.
So Reformation Day, approximately 500 years ago, 506 years, 7 years ago now, 1517, was the year that the whole Reformation started with a monk named Martin Luther who wanted to discuss a few things. So he wrote 95 different topics of discussion, nailed it to the church door in Wittenberg, and it was that was the newspaper of the day because it was just before, actually right when the printing press was being made. So that was how the town got news. And he said he wanted to discuss those things. The printing press picked up that paper, shipped them all over the place, and everybody had these topics on their mind of how where the Catholic Church basically was in error, or at the time the Christian Church in general was in error, and some of those theses I don't even agree with.
Yeah.
But his point was that he wanted to discuss them. Ended up being branded a heretic, and the whole European landscape, politically, theologically, got upheaval, got flipped on its head. and then a bunch of other reformers popped up. Calvin being really renowned among them for organizing Christian thought, and anyways, totally turned the world upside down because of wanting to discuss things.
It was no accident he did it on
Yeah.
October 31st.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right, because in one regards,
that was the day he nailed the 95 Theses. Was,
in one regards, is kind of the anti-Halloween because Tetzel was going around and he was saying you could spring your granny out of purgatory if you paid enough money for the construction of St. Peter's, in Rome. And so it was this idea of like you can buy people out of purgatory. It really was kind of around your departed loved ones. And on this day, 31st, he makes a statement.
And it's not all that different from ancient Greek mythology when you put the coins on their eyes so they could get across the river Styx.
Right.
It really is. It's not all that different from what people have been doing in paganism forever.
I mean, even he's like in Greek mythology, you talk about the seasons, winter is when Persephone, right?
Right.
Yeah, Persephone. How's that myth go?
She's down in the underworld for
Right.
for winter and fall, I think. Right.
She's allowed to come out,
Yeah.
Yeah. She's
third
come
of
up for a
spring.
time.
right? And so Demeter's all depressed because
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Persephone's gone, so that's why it all dies.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were the cakes called? You read the
Soul
same book.
cakes.
Soul cakes.
Soul cakes.
Right.
Yeah. So purgatory is a completely syncretistic, pagan idea, even though it's covered with Catholicism. It's still pagan, and it's just like the soul cakes that the pagans were doing, where you would eat the soul cake, right, and it would spring someone from purgatory, and it's the same thing. It's these indulgences.
I don't know about you, but I'd rather eat cake than pay to get out of
Yeah, I'll buy the cake.
An excuse to eat cake.
the Grandma, you're released.
Just to release my entire family from purgatory. Whoopsies.
Oops.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry, I interrupted. So you explained. You were asking him a question. You were starting to answer it, and then I completely
Did
lost.
you finish your thought?
Yeah.
It was seasons.
Oh yeah.
Seasons. So we have seasons. That's not going away anytime soon. I
Get
don't
on me
think.
for picking that up.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's global warming is
Yeah.
as bad as we
Yeah.
are told it's going to be.
Well,
And it's
we
just
know
going to be
we're
summer
fifth
year
season, we
round.
have fire season. But
Yeah, it's all going to burn up. But so there are seasons. Does God want us to use those as tools for telling stories or remembrance?
Yes.
The pagans definitely are using it that way. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
You
no,
agree.
fin- no,
Great.
finish.
Yeah, you jumped the gun. Thank you. But then should Christians come along and say, "Hey, yeah, no, you are doing it. You're not doing it right." So should we take that, reform it, and use these seasons as well?
I think a great example of that is the Borgund Stave. You guys know what that is?
No.
I think it's the oldest church in Scandinavia.
Oh, yeah.
It's this beautiful big black building, and it's I think it's the oldest church in Scandinavia, and it's absolutely filled inside with carvings of like Norse mythology. But what happened is when Christianity came through the area, they rewrote their myths, right? They rewrote them to honor God. So it's filled with carvings of Norse mythology, rewritten to be Christianized, right? Because like the Vikings they valued violence and death in battle and rape, pillage, and murder. Like those were things that were virtuous to them, and so obviously their mythology had to go in that sense. But instead of just forgetting their history, they rewrote it. And that's the story of the Borgund Stave.
Yeah, Thor is very prominent in these carvings,
Right.
right? And so it's basically Lewis before Lewis ever existed.
Right.
I mean, we talked about this the other day that that the Gentile world was prepared by Greek mythology to accept the trueness of Christ. Right? They were looking for heroes too. Theseus. They were. He wasn't perfect, but he was a lot better than a lot of other ones.
yeah,
and,
there are touch points.
there were touch points, and
Hearing great stories prepared them for the greatest story.
Right,
Made them
exactly.
hungry for the greatest story.
yeah. Their minds were prepped when they heard the real thing. They're like, "That's what I've been looking for my whole life." Interesting.
So how?
Is there any of that in Halloween?
Yeah, that's. I was just about to ask. How
Any potential for that?
is Halloween our history, and do we rewrite it?
Is there a story?
Well,
worth
the
retelling?
people who've gone before are.
Yeah,
Right. And like you were starting to say, Reformation Day is about remembering saints who went before, and Halloween is about remembering dead ancestors. And so, like,
Well,
I think we kind of ought to say yes already by continuing the tradition of Reformation Day.
honoring saints
Yeah.
and martyrs.
Right.
Yeah.
We
Of
don't
course.
do it. We don't do some of the. We don't have some of the trappings of Halloween. We don't trick or treat, but we do dress up. We do get together and celebrate.
And we're not
remember
springing
the dead.
anyone from purgatory.
And we're
either.
not
Yeah.
right. And we're not springing people from purgatory.
Yeah.
Cakes, man.
We're not. Yeah. Yeah.
But like we as Christians, and we as Christians believe that we are our man's chief ends to glorify God and enjoy Him forever, right? So everything we do is to glorify God, which means to not that we're adding glory to Him, but we are pointing at His glory. And so in Reformation Day celebration, at least how the way that we as a group see it, that we're looking at these accomplishments of the saints and how they've advanced the gospel worldwide, and how they've glorified God through their actions, and those actions are still providing glory to God through the ripple effect of what they've done. And I don't. I guess the question is there a way that Halloween can actually glorify God in any celebration of it? Right?
In the
like,
practices?
in the actual practicing of celebrating Halloween, whether we change a little bit or not, like what within Halloween as
So current
seen
American
modern,
current American
not
Halloween.
original paganism one, although it's still there's still ripples of that in what we do today, but in modern day Halloween, what of that can glorify God, if any?
Yeah, so maybe we have to divide that too, right? You have the everyday LARPers that do Halloween, right?
The ones who do it
Kids
every
on the street, or people in their houses, right? And then you have the real hardcore people that are believing
Right.
stuff, that are actually trying to recall
Right.
or currently acting out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a real things. Mm-hmm. And,
Which is a real and growing percentage, but it's also not the majority of people
yeah, yeah.
Not the majority of people
celebrating Halloween.
Gotcha.
Probably the first category he said is most people.
It is telling that every ex
Yeah,
witch I've ever read says absolutely do not celebrate Halloween, and they don't let their kids celebrate Halloween, and the
witches don't?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
the
former witches.
Oh,
yeah.
It's like that's
Yeah.
one of their holy days.
It was their high and holy day, and they took great delight and joy in the fact that people unthinkingly were engaging in it. So, they're, yeah.
Well, you shouldn't unthinkingly engage in anything. So
Right.
if you are going to take a stand one way or the other on how you
Cool.
celebrate
Yeah.
or don't celebrate Halloween, know what you're doing.
Well, there's a book I was reading. They make the point where it's like, would you celebrate Ku Klux Klan Day?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Is that appropriate?
Let's redeem Ku Klux Klan Day. Everybody dressing Ku Klux Klan things.
Well, if we're just dressed up in cool robes, right? That's
Right,
why
yeah.
It's just robes.
It's just robes.
Yeah, and we're not actually going to burn
Yeah.
people. We're just going to, we're just going to, right.
I'm good.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's Hitler Day, right? No, nobody's doing Hitler Day. And yet we'll do Satan Day.
Yeah.
Dress up like witches and goblins and ghouls. And
Yeah. So which practices are irredeemable? Which practices what are some of those practices? Trick or treating. What are the religious practices of Halloween? If we want to make it a religion, maybe we don't want to.
The ritual practices.
Well,
what are the parts of it?
Yeah. What are the parts of Halloween?
I still would, for me personally, I'd go one step backwards.
Okay.
I actually don't think the Halloween celebration in either stream of thought, right? I love my Catholic friends, but I really do not love praying to saints in any way, shape, or form, and I don't believe in purgatory at all. So I don't believe in that stream of thought, and I definitely don't believe in the pagan ritual stream of thought. And really credible scholars, encyclopedias can lay out how trick-or-treating and and costumes really are, through the Irish Catholics who came here, but really the Irishness of the Irish Catholics, they really are, euphemized versions of pretty dark pagan practices. They came from really bad places, and we turned them into fun little toy things. So for me personally, I really like the idea of redeeming the day, but I like the idea of redeeming the day by scrapping the day and putting something else Christian in its place. And the springboard for me is 3 John, verse 11, which is pretty simple. It says, "Do not imitate what is evil," right? And that word for "do not imitate," memimu, right? Present middle imperative of prohibition. Do not have the habit of imitating, right? So it comes from memeomai, which is the word for an actor. Basically what he's saying is, do not dress up in the clothing of evil, is what that is kind of saying in 3 John right there. And so this
100% agree.
yeah.
Yep.
For I like to redeem the day because Jesus is the Lord of the calendar, and I really like the idea of honoring departed saints who have gone before. So I don't have any problem with those sort of things.
And I love candy.
And I love candy, and frankly, I love dressing up. Like we love.
Yeah, I was going to
Parties
say
are
the
awesome.
way you said that you said dressing up, and you might want to clarify. Like we dress up at a Reformation Day party,
Right.
as dead saints.
The question
So
is,
you
Yeah.
meant like dressing up as like
Yeah.
ghoulish, gory, bloodstained,
Yeah.
ghosts, that sort of stuff.
Exactly, and it does in fact say imitate what is good. There are many places where we're told to imitate. So like the idea of dressing up as evil and imitating the practices of evil, even if they're in little tiny ways, I think that falls afoul of.
Yeah, so how far does that
100%
verse
agree.
go? Like, what is included in acting as evil?
Is trick-or-treating.
I would go so far to say that imitating evil is practicing trick or treating is imitating evil. It is putting on the clothing of this pagan tradition. The origins of trick or treating, there's a couple different origins maybe, which is going and collecting their firewood to burn people alive.
Right.
And so, give me firewood, or we'll take your daughters, right?
Right.
Or we'll
Right.
take your daughters and burn them.
Right.
Give me the wood so we can burn your daughters, or we'll burn your daughters, basically.
But how far? Where is the line on that? Because what if you went door to door and didn't say trick or treat?
Right.
So or is door to door candy hustling automatically evil from now to the end? Evil from now to
Right.
the end of time, right? So where do
Like
you
we
draw the line? How do
jokingly-
you draw
Yeah.
the line?
Like we
No,
jokingly
that's
said
what we need to talk
earlier, we could do it on April Fool's Day and probably wouldn't have the same association and be fine. I think we could even do it on the exact same day, but I think culturally, right now, you couldn't do trick or treating even without saying the name. You couldn't do it on the same day and it not be associated with
Right.
trick or treating, right? If you cold turkey cut trick or treating for maybe 20 years, maybe 100 years, I don't know how long it would take to reset some of the culture, and then did it on the exact same day, it'd probably be fine, right? It's not the act of going to one's house and saying, "May I have candy or not?" Right?
Right.
It's,
If in
it's-
June, like June 2nd, we all go to Gideon's house and
the
say,
culture around.
"Give us candy, or we'll prank you." Right.
and he doesn't, and so we like wrap his whole car in
Because extortion is fun.
Right. It's hilarious amongst friends. What's a little?
Wait a minute, Gideon kidnapped Miles.
Okay, so we're not even arguing over the mechanic. We're arguing over the tactic.
And so that's kind of why I brought up the church calendar, the church history about the piano.
Right.
Those Christians couldn't have piano in worship because for them it was eating. Them saying meat sacrificed to idols, and you being like, "Oh yeah, give it to me." That's what it was like for them. It was too confusing.
How did they get over it?
A couple hundred years.
But the bordellos didn't stop using pianos. The people just started realizing it was okay to use pianos.
Yeah, there was a slow shift. Piano was used in different situations. Bach started using
Right. So why
piano.
could one of those
Right,
situations
yeah.
leading the charge be the church?
Yeah, the difference is
Well-
in that one, the weight is definitely on the side of the piano. It's a huge instrument. Because music is from the Lord. It's something that is already in scriptures, beautiful and talked about lots. Versus the way you relate to dead people, either worshiping
yeah.
them or praying to them, whatever. That already stuff that is condemned in the Bible, right? And so the weight's not on that side for Yeah.
I do have a question though, and this might be towards the point of maybe we should use trick or treat, because we all celebrate Thor's Day and Freya's Day.
What
We
are
don't
those?
celebrate,
Thursday.
but
Yeah.
we live and use the word Thursday and Friday.
Right.
We use the months of the year, which a lot of them are tied to the gods.
So one of the ways you win is you take its potency away.
But the thing about those is they didn't wait a couple hundred years to start using them. They used those days even when there was people still doing Thor worship and Freya worship. And so how do we differentiate that?
Well, and the piano analogy, that was not the case with all churches, I guarantee.
Probably not all of their new Christians were spending all of their time in brothels.
No. I mean the church refusing to use the piano because it called the bordello to mind, like that. I'm sure that was the case in some churches, but some churches were probably also using the piano.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
Probably.
and so
yeah.
Again, it's
so it's
they
not
chose a different tactic.
Yeah,
They're going to
not a
take the
perfect
piano
analogy,
back by
yeah.
just doing it now.
But with the Thursday and Friday, Thursday and Thursday, instead of trying to attack that day itself and reclaim that day, as you reduce the influence and power of Thor and Freya in culture, those days cease to have their meaning, right? So they were like making those two gods
Obsolete.
Yeah, obsolete. That also was one way to conquer. The way we celebrate Halloween does not decrease its popularity. It doesn't really decrease its weight.
Increases its weight.
It either increases it or keeps it the same.
Yeah, I think like that's kind of what this podcast is all about, and all of them. We're talking about culture. Is like when you look back at history, people wildly swing the pendulum, right? They either anything goes, or they turn into late 1700s or early 1700s Puritans. Nothing goes. Don't even smile, right? So like, right. So they're just constantly swinging the pendulum. Oh, we can't have pianos. Oh, we can have heavy metal and fog and smoke machine and I guess what we're trying to find like what's the road that a Christian should walk. And with the case of Halloween right here too. Do we scrap the whole day and start with something new?
I don't think we have to start with something new. We have something. Right. That's part of church history and would be a great replacement of it. I just think we have to be careful to not synchronize them.
I think the origin of the Reformation Day is a good enough battle to keep fighting to stop the indulgences and which were going on during All Hallows Eve. Even if it didn't have its roots in paganism, it did. But even if it was just indulgences, and for a lot of people it was just about indulgences and worshiping saints. And so the battle against those indulgences is, I think, a worthy fight to keep doing, and so I think Reformation is a good substitute, more worthy than All Hallows Eve, and a beautiful thing. Yeah.
The other thing I always think about too is like where we expose our children to this. So even if we dress up our little kid as an M&M, right, and we're walking around. I don't mean the rapper.
Yeah.
My kids dress up as M&M.
M&Ms
You got
don't
other
have
problems.
rappers.
Yeah.
They're not individually packaged.
Buy a belt.
Right.
The problem is not individually packaged.
Just dumb joke.
But you walk your kid around dressed in M&M. I don't participate in ghouls and goblins. Well, your kid does participate by walking around and seeing ghouls and goblins, and is bound to think like, wait, what are we actually doing here? Why is that person dressed up?
They won't actually think
with an axe in their head?
They won't be asking, what are we actually doing here?
Right.
They'll just go along and you're just treating them to be blind to it.
Do you
Teaching them.
Do you think there's
not
a
if you're intentional. And I don't think it's the same thing as like when people
You
say
could be intentional.
I send my kids to public school so they can be a light. Like in that, and we're not going to start the public school homeschool conversation in this episode, but you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
People Christians send their kids to public school, and one of their excuses for why it's okay is that they're being a light to the non-Christians there, and those kids are not prepared.
Yeah.
They're not missionaries. They're not trained. They're not ready to spend the majority of their hours of the day, of the week, surrounded by secular culture and survive. But we're talking about one day a year
Yeah.
that you can prepare for all year long, and then take the fight door to door.
So my question would be, because symbolism is an important thing, semiotics is an important thing. When in the Old Testament, when the Passover happens, and the youngest child is supposed to say, "Dad, why do we do this Passover lamb and all these herbs and such?" And then he can relate to him, the great nature of the covenant God. I'm wondering if a child, as you're walking around, why do we do trick or treat? Is there any possible way we can relate all of these Halloween traditions back to the greatness of our covenant keeping God? And I just think we can't. I think we can't. And not only can we not relate any of the practices back to Scripture and our covenant keeping God, I think, like, the most popular genre of movie right now, by far, is horror, right? And I just had a conversation with the high schoolers about, poltergeists and those sort of things, and it just shocked what some of them had experienced, friends they knew they'd experienced. There is a fascination in this culture with horror and with the occult. And I'm wondering if that doesn't start at a very early age, as you're walking around and your friend Bobby walks by with an axe stuck in his head and fake blood running down, even if you're dressed like an M&M. So, like, it'd be very hard for me to relate back to my M&M child. There is no biblical root to the day at all. Like,
So yeah, when your kid asks, what is trick-or-treating, how are you going to respond? Do you say,
well, the witches.
do you say, we're just doing it as a light? Is that how we would go about it? Just say, yeah, we're just here to go spread the gospel. We don't actually trick-or-treat. Is that how you'd have to say it? Or would you say we trick-or-treat, I don't even know how to say it.
Well, I guess there's kind of the spectrum of you don't do anything, you should go along. I guess the spectrum of you do nothing, who cares about Halloween, good or bad. Then there's the people who just participate in it. And then there's people who go and participate in the day but are I guess trying to aggressively be Christian about it. And there's people who fight it by not by abstaining from doing it. So it's kind of, I guess, a spectrum. There might be a few more in there, but that's kind of a spectrum of all the ways you could address it.
I guess, yeah, when we read about, what was it, they set up a rock. There was a kind of a civil war in Israel. They set up the rock. It was between the people across the river and the people on the mainland. And they set up a rock to a memorial. So when their kids asked, what's this big old rock here doing? Why is it here? They could say, this is when the Lord, helped Israel, and this is we got over it, and it showed the history. If people can make a memorial out of a rock,
Right.
how much more can they make a memorial out of trick or treating? We see, okay, we are going and knocking on the door. This is an image of something.
Right.
There's something going on here. I just worry. I don't think
Can you
kids
make it
have
Christian?
have the discretion to be like, no, we do this because we're Christians, but I don't know how to walk that ridgeline, and
I think
if it's possible.
is it more potent to participate in as Christian way as you can, and so people say, oh, they're celebrating a little bit differently, or is it more potent and head turning to say we're not going to participate, and everybody else like, wait, how come you're not participating? Like,
You're doing something totally in parallel.
Yeah.
Which one is a bigger attention getter for spreading the gospel, right?
Yeah, so
which one is
That kind of brings the question, because like a lot of churches will have harvest parties, and they'll do, they'll dress up in costumes and they'll have harvest parties, and it essentially is a Halloween party, and I don't think any kid is fooled that this is a Halloween party. It feels to me like that's not the good way to go. Like, you either, if it's good, if it's fine, participate, and if it's not, do something completely other.
So, I wonder, like, so when I think harvest party, I don't think Halloween at all.
Oh, at all.
Period. Nothing. No, and maybe that's just a culture thing, right? So, Midwest is much more farming out here. It's ranching, different weather patterns, seasons of influence our cultures. Yeah, when I think harvest party, right? It's people have harvested their fruits, their vegetables, their crops, their grains. It's hay bales, hay rides.
Yeah, hay bales, hay rides, flannel,
right?
and cider.
Yeah, it's flannel. Yeah, I mean we had
dancing.
our church
apple bobbing.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
our church, our surrounding churches. There's this one particular farmer who he'd have a harvest party. People would bring all kinds of stuff. There'd be
Yeah, we
square
did that in
dancing,
Maine, too.
everything.
It was great.
It was a huge, beautiful thing. Loved
Yeah.
it. Nobody was dressing up. That didn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't associate, when I hear harvest party, I don't associate that with Halloween in the slightest in any way.
Right.
I think around here
Visibly
they
or-
call them
Yeah.
harvest parties, but everybody still kids still come in Spider-Man costumes,
Okay.
or some local kids show up in their witch and goblin costumes, and they just do Halloween at church.
Yeah.
So like that I feel is like a
So
co-option.
the problem with that is a lack of intentionality,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
would be the problem with any
Anything.
type of retaking of the day, whether you go door to door for candy or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lack of putting actual thought into what you're doing that's a
Right.
problem. Yeah,
So it would
lack of discernment.
do you guys think, and I know you probably haven't done research on this, but I haven't. Do you think that the growth in Halloween all around us is part of that indication of a fascination with the occult? And why is our culture so much more fascinated with the occult? Why is that such an epically huge day in Murphy's here, second largest in the nation?
I think it's absolutely because we're realizing that technology and science isn't going to save us, and people are beginning to seek out the old gods.
Feeling the bankruptcy of materialism, and so they're like, there must be a spirit world, and wow, this one is sure attractive and powerful.
Well, and attractive. I totally 100% agree, especially with the MCU and stuff like that too. All Marvel comics,
They're the gods. The Greek
yeah,
gods are
you
alive
got-
again.
You got the same personalities in the Greek gods and some new technological ones too. Technological gods, like it's a callback to the way people were before the modern
Wait, really quick. Maybe
technological era.
maybe it was a throwaway comment. You said the Marvel characters are gods.
Well, I guess
Oh,
that's
some
I can leave that for a long
placeholders for the-
second.
some of them
I'm
literally
saying-
are.
Yeah, Thor.
I'm saying that the people are basically worshiping them, not like it's becoming part of the modern mythology.
Yeah, modern mythology.
I
That's a good way
see.
to
So
put it.
like in the same way
But that's
they
not the
worship
same
Taylor
as worshiping
Swift.
them.
In the same way they worship Taylor Swift.
Somewhat.
Yeah,
I mean,
similar.
there's. I love the Marvel movies. I think they're great,
Right.
and I think kids should have heroes. And I think like there are lots of Christological elements, and there's good worldview even in the Marvel
Careful,
movies.
there's some bad.
there's some
bad
really bad
Marvel
There's some
movies.
really
Outside
really
of
bad
this. Really
stuff
bad.
too.
So is
But
Marvel movies.
Is there a difference between the wood stave churches that have Thor carved into them, a conquered god, right, that now bows to the one true God, and is there something different between Marvel's Thor, an unconquered god?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I just think
Yeah,
I think
so
we're
I think-
so starved as a culture for transcendent meaning and for heroes, and we're materialistic to the nth. Like when there are heroes who descend to earth and defend against evil, and they defend against other godlike anti-heroes. Like, there's that we're just starved for that. And that's a fault of the church. Like the church is so itself. And we may, I just was saying this in high schools the other day, we may, even myself growing up, like I believed in demons and angels, but I didn't practically believe in demons and angels until I got older and I started seeing things and interacting with things. I'm like, well, this is a real world, and this world impinges in very dark ways on people that I love, and I think people are realizing the bankruptcy of an Enlightenment thought that or a reductionist thought. We're just matter in motion. No, there's spirit, and there's dark spirits, and there's good spirits.
I think it is also growing so much because this is an analogy. The transgenders are still reading to the children in the libraries.
Right.
Halloween is that for witches. They are reading to the children in the libraries.
It's advertising.
They
Yeah.
are advertising.
Yeah.
They are couching or hiding this witchcraft in a seemingly innocuous thing or innocent thing, which is dressing up and eating candy. But what they're doing is giving them a lot of death.
So, excuse me. After reading this book, pretty riveting life
Which
story
book is
of
that?
Doreen Irvine, From Witchcraft to Christ.
That's a great book.
And she presents a very clear gospel message of how she was saved, and she presents a lot of good truth about Christianity. And I don't have any reason to disbelieve anything she puts forward in this book of her experiences in witchcraft. And in a chapter in the middle of it, chapter 13, when after she's been crowned Queen of the Black Witches, which you have to read the book to see what all that means, but she was a very, very high warlock, very, very high witch, and was traveling around Europe, discussing things with different covens, and like basically being the one of the connections between all the covens of Europe. And she says many of the discussions were held, the most important subject being how to make black witchcraft more appealing. Many people, especially the young, were taking a fresh interest in the occult. It was important to give witchcraft a new look, and these guidelines were laid down. Never frighten anyone, offer new realms of mystery and excitement, make witchcraft less sinister, make it look like natural, innocent adventure. Anyone is attracted by adventure and mystery. Cover up evil in appealing wrappings. So that was as her being one of the top witch in Europe, in the oldest satanic circles and witchcraft circles of the world. She was purposely going around and talking about how can we wrap this up in a pretty little bow and hand it to kids. Halloween pretty much does exactly what that.
Yeah.
And she's not for witchcraft. She is speaking fully against it the whole time. So it's not. She's selling like we were trying to sugarcoat witchcraft.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
it's very. I feel like the effects of Halloween and the kid dressing up in the red devil costume, like the jokey comic version devil costume.
Yeah.
All that is
It's a desensitization.
desensitization.
And they're working very intentionally, right? So and it's like our neighboring county, Tuolumne County, right? Actually, is very depressed, sad county, very dark county actually, and
The
has
casinos.
yeah, right. It also has an incredibly high suicide rate,
Oh.
very high, and at the same time, every year around Halloween, there are some large churches over in that area that will host Halloween parties on their campuses where they'll have hundreds of local children coming. And, their reasoning is, they do it out of kindness, right?
If they're gonna do it. They better do it here where it's safe.
Exactly. It's safe. They can monitor it.
Better
and
wear
they will-
condoms.
Yeah. And it's just a...
They're going to sleep around.
Spiritual
Give
condoms.
them spiritual condoms.
Yeah.
Is that good enough for commonplace code?
Give them spiritual
I think the analogy holds.
But so, it's already a very sad place, countywide, in the schools and everything.
Yeah.
You know that there is an active dark force, with these witches that want, and how better to get onto a church campus where you're then training up Christian children, ideally. They're opening the front doors,
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you?
and they know it.
Yeah.
Witchcraft is in this area.
Yeah. If you're just allowing
Yeah, you're putting it out.
even
public
as
blast.
innocent paganism, you're run of the mill pagan. If you're allowing that onto your campus and letting that be the heart of it.
Yeah, the
It's
most
pretty-
innocent version of paganism is still paganism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my point. Like that's it's pretty unwise.
Yeah, I think are we allowed to respond to articles directly on this podcast?
I think we should, because I think there's some really important Christian thinkers out there who I really like, who I disagree with on this.
I think the James Jordan one is probably the biggest one
I disagree with that one.
that I think it's good to address. And his comments basically amounting to the best way to fight the devil is through mockery, and the best way to mock him is to dress up as a devil in tights with a pitchfork. That's a common mockery of the devil. Maybe he doesn't say the best. The best.
I think he does.
Way to
I think
mock.
in that article he says,
Do you have more to say? Or
Maybe-
Satan is
double
pride,
check.
and the way you fight pride is you mock it.
Yeah, I don't know if he says the best way to mock the devil is dressing up as him, but he does say it is a good way, at least.
Yeah,
Do it.
that just, since it's so fresh in my mind after just reading Screwtape Letters again,
Yeah.
right? I remember that the one section. I forget what chapter it is, what letter it is.
Yep.
But whenever the patient, right, the Christian who's trying to be manipulated by this demon, whenever he thinks of you, make sure you make him think of something that's like dressed up in red tights and kind of joking and thank you, yeah, right. Make sure he thinks of you as something that's basically
You put Screwtape quote in there.
Yeah.
Way to jump.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Shut up,
you
Ethan.
for giving me
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
subliminal thought. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That was Gideon told me about that quote last
Oh,
night.
gotcha.
So,
Thanks, sound guy.
yeah.
That was very sound logic to put that in there.
That's
So
fine.
my
Yeah, but just
Right.
So I disagree with James Jordan. I didn't read that article, but just from that, I completely disagree because
Yeah.
So if something that powerful that you should be aware of, if you think of it as this cheap little
And then
dollar
going,
store trinket,
to
You're not gonna treat it
Third
seriously.
John,
Yeah.
going to Third John,
Right.
and verse 9,
Right.
saying,
Don't imitate.
Don't put on the clothing of evil."
Right.
I mean, that's exactly what you're doing when you mock the devil.
Right.
He loves it. Right.
yeah.
So is there a difference like between things we can or how we should mock? So for example, I mean, we talked about Nazis earlier. Hogan's Heroes,
Right.
right? Some people really dislike it. Like my grandpa really dislikes it. He thinks it doesn't do justice to how bad things actually were.
too lighthearted for
Yeah.
The creator of it, if I'm correct, was actually a Jew.
Several of the guys in it were
Multiple
also
of the actors
right.
were POW.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, I've seen some episodes and some really funny stuff in there. Is that good? Is that bad? And then, if it is okay, can we treat Satan the same way?
I think the difference is in like a Hogan Heroes situation, and I think the difference is that the benefit of a Hogan Heroes situation is all of Hogan and his heroes are their reaction to it's basically a show about how they could be happy and in a joyous way combat stuff in the war. And so even though they don't show a lot of the atrocities of the Nazis, I do appreciate the seeing that a lot of those actors were POWs, or at least several of them were from the war, that they can treat it lightheartedly, which is probably why they did well after being a POW. Right? They were able to be lighthearted, light in their heart during those times.
Yeah.
To some degree.
Along those lines, like, the idea of mocking evil, if you mean by mocking, like, so evil's intent is to bring death on you and to cause great fear. And a Christian, though sometimes we fall to this, a Christian has the Spirit of God in them. We have nothing to fear. Perfect love casts out fear. And we have perfect love in us. And we're full of the joy of the Lord, which is our strength. And so evil is robbed of its power when death smiles us. I knew a man, death smiled, and he smiled back. Right. That's a great line, because when evil smiles at us, and it doesn't faze us, and we can smile back at it, that's a form of mockery. But there's another form of mockery that I think that he's suggesting, which is a bad idea, because in Jude, verse 9, even the archangel Michael doesn't bring a railing accusation against Satan. He has enough respect of Satan that he says, "The Lord rebuke you." And the Lord does sit in the heavens in derision, and he does mock. He has the right to, because it's what?
Yeah, I think there's a difference.
Yeah, right.
There's a
Like Satan's
difference.
a gnat in a hurricane compared to him.
There's a difference in mockery of holding up your shield and saying, "You can't manipulate me."
Right.
And someone saying, dropping the shield and be like, "Hey, you can't touch me." Right?
Or,
Like it.
let me get in your costume.
Right,
Stand
like,
beside you.
Let me put down my shield and sword. It's like you can
Yeah.
hold up your shield and your sword and be like, "Haha, you can't touch me." But
Do your worst.
Put down your sword and shield and be like, "You can't touch me." One of those is a wise way of saying you can't touch me.
Right.
Yeah. So
Or
whether
they try to
Sometimes-
cut his
right.
arm off, and the other one's
So-
like to try to, and you die.
Yeah.
So, like,
Some of
there's
those,
a
one
difference.
of those you have to work in that you're actually fighting for him.
Right.
Somehow.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
Well, you are fighting for it when you put on your shield and
I
sword
guess, yeah.
because you're just you
Right.
removed yourself from the battlefield.
Yeah. Nobody behind you is protected anymore.
Yeah.
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 So you are fighting for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
So whether it's Luther or you, Ethan, like it's okay when the devil comes to accuse you and torment you. You can chase him away with a fart.
Right.
That's okay.
Well, that's a sword.
Yeah.
The
One
poltergeist
that I
have a
can
smell.
wield
Anything
very
has a
well.
smell.
Well, we should call them arrows. Have a quiver full.
Yeah.
I mean, resist the devil and he will flee.
But yeah, I mean, if the archangel Michael, you know, appeals to God, Satan's at a level then of power that you don't want to mess with him in a flippant way, right?
You don't want to, goad him into a fight,
Yeah.
right? And you fight him
Right.
when you must, but you don't want to flippantly goad him into a fight.
Right.
Like that is
Yeah. I mean, he's
Wrong
still
type of monster.
he's still a dragon.
Right.
yeah.
He's still prowling like a roaring lion, looking for people to devour.
Yeah. Even though
Even though-
he looks like an angel of light and he looks all
And even though he's
pretty-
defeated, like he has to flee. And I think that's, I mean, when Christian missionaries step forth in the power of the word, when an exorcist steps forward in the power of the word, like, he doesn't have the capacity to resist the Spirit of God, and the Spirit of God is in his people. But that doesn't mean he's lost power. I mean, he's lost power, but he's got a lot of power. Like, you don't mess with him.
Be flippant.
That was kind of the thing that I was saying to the kids at the high school, because I remember how we got even on this topic, but maybe I was doing prep for this podcast or whatever. But saying to them, like, when you find yourself fascinated with things that are occult, like, take a step back for a second. You do not want to be fascinated by the occult in any way, shape, or form.
Which is why I have a problem with Harry Potter, because it's softcore intro into the occult. Like, even though people are like, no, there's no occult in the you're taking witches and wizards and things that are occult, right?
Right.
And you are sugarcoating them and making them seem super, super innocuous, but then they aren't in real life, right? So you sugarcoat it saying that this is how witches actually can be, and true witches are not that way. They're not sugarcoated, and yeah.
And I've mentioned this a lot of times, but my experience, with, going up through middle school, high school, Harry Potter was always super popular.
Yeah.
And then going into college, that, my peers would then become really involved into these Harry Potter groups where they're putting them, there's silly things like they put each other into houses and figure out their types and who they are. But there was always a subgroup that really started getting heavily involved into it.
Yeah, there's no problem like sorting people into different houses. I mean,
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is kind of fun silliness, but
Something that's been done a long time before Harry Potter.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a new thing.
But Ouija boards, that's how many people have been caught into the occult and dark things, and even just watching horror movies. I mean, I told you some of the things that those kids were saying from really good Christian families, and and like this kid's uncle said, guys, we are not watching horror movies anymore, based on these things that are happening in our home.
it takes away. I think people who watch horror films set themselves up for encountering demons, encountering poltergeists. I read this book last night about witchcraft, and on my drive home, it's dark, and I felt a little weird. But then you just you have to realize the spirit is in control.
Right.
There's no fear there. The things that go bump in the night, they don't have any power
Right.
over you. Yeah.
And yet, like when you the one time.
Mystery and excitement.
The one time that I've confronted evil various times in my life, but one time I've told you guys this story. When I was outside, Victoria was a little girl, and out in the yard, and it was kind of really like late dusk, moon out kind of a thing. Out there with the dog, and somebody turned into my rather long driveway, and it was just a little weird at night. And they were just standing there, and I was like, "Hi, how are you?" And they didn't really say anything. And then like I got punched, like just punched with this wave of evil, just like some voices screaming in my head, "Flee!" Like just. And that moment, whether the dog picked it up on me or not, my very large, aggressive attack dog just went nuts. Just like crazy. I was like, whoa. So I took her and we went inside and we shut the door and I like locked the door because I had little baby Victoria in there. And I'm a pretty brave guy. I've gone through a lot of exciting things, but I was not staying there. And I looked out and that person was still staying there, and behind their hand, like, and this long knife just dropped down, and it was in the moonlight, but it was a long, like, daggery knife that they had behind their forearm, and that all happened like this. But I've never felt such a rush of evil and a command to flee, and I might be dead if I hadn't. But it was a real palpable, like a punch.
Materialists, if we have any in our audience, are going to love you too. We're going to fill our comment section up.
Yeah.
Come on right. Come on as a.
Well, this is
So-
really
Guest.
interesting. Just reading the mythologies by Edith Hamilton. The people they come up with these stories because of fear. A lot of them come up with these stories because of fear. They are out in the woods and they see dark shadows. They see
Explanation of a fear.
reflections in the water that shouldn't be there, and they need some way to explain it. And they need some way to explain it because those things are real.
Right. Yeah.
Those things are actually there. But they have no way to explain it, so they come up with fun stories.
Yeah.
When maybe they weren't actually as fun as.
I was going to say, at the time, the mythologies were not so fun.
Yeah, well, they did beautify the creation around them, the spiritual activity around them. In reality, it's often much less beautiful than Hermes running around with wings on his helmet and boots and stealing snakes and or whatever he does. It's often a lot more sinister.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So like stories. So we mentioned Harry Potter, right?
Yeah.
We had one person sounded kind of negative. There
Who?
might be over there. But and I go back and forth. I can't say I'm
Guess I'm not a Hufflepuff.
fully for or against, but we have there are certain groups we like and enjoy, writers, authors, churches that even speak profitably of Harry Potter. So what is there anything in there that we can extract and say that is good? What is bad?
Well, I don't want to hog the mic on Harry Potter, so I'm the only one who mentioned it so far. But I think only read a little bit of the books. I haven't read through the whole series, though I did sit down and actually watch through all the movies. But there's the good parts of Harry Potter. The really good parts are the awesome fun world building, which we've talked about before, as just people who love that type of genre. But anything good, any sacrificial thing, anything that was like redemptive, it's all stolen from Christianity, right? So the really good parts are not. They don't come from the witch aspect. They don't come from that side.
Which
of it.
aspect?
They don't come from the occult aspect.
Gotcha.
As soft as it is, they come from Christianity and are appropriated from Christianity. So that's my 2 cents.
How we doing on
Or
runtime?
thoughts.
Hour 20.
I feel strong.
I maybe we close it with a summary and application. Maybe I feel like something that we all maybe agreed on was don't dress up as the enemy. That's a quote straight from Doug Wilson. He has a blog on that, so go read that. But don't dress up as the enemy. Also a straight quote from 3 John.
Right.
And so whatever that means, at least don't dress up as the devil. But I think we should be very intentional. How do we say it?
Intentional.
Intentionable.
Say
There
that
we go.
intentionally.
Say it intentionally. About what we're doing when we're celebrating anything.
Are we each doing a wrap up?
No. Go for
Are we
it.
doing a wrap up, or do we want to make this into a 2-parter?
I do not think we need to do another part.
Yeah, we could come back to it with like a more in depth look at
A specific
maybe
aspect.
would
witchcraft or a specific
I would say there is
aspect.
a,
Because
a
we've opened a lot of
segue.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that there's more to say, but not.
Viewers
on
might have
Halloween
questions.
right
If
now.
you have questions,
Yeah.
I guess the fantastic
Text them
segue
in.
I would have from the witchcraft conversation is this book I read called The Facts on Halloween. Is that what it's called? It talks a bit about the community of Halloween, the community of witchcraft, actually, and how the community of sin is a powerful thing. And I think the segues really well into our conversation
with Adam.
with Adam
Yeah.
next week about the community of sin with homosexuality. And so maybe we keep that in mind
Yeah.
from this conversation.
Yeah, I think if we're all doing a little bit of wrap up, if we have anything to say, I think in how we treat Halloween should be intentional enough to make a point, make a statement. If you do participate in it, which I would advise not to, if you do participate in it, you have to be so intentional about it that you're basically witnessing every aspect, every moment. You should be witnessing everybody around you. It should be overtly you're sharing the gospel. Otherwise, it looks like you're participating. So I would advise not partaking in it because I think that's the strongest I think
Statement.
it's the strongest statement of what you actually believe. And I've had in not participating over my whole lifetime, I've had hundreds, if not thousands, of questions of why not. And so
Lots of opportunities for the
I've had
gospel.
lots of opportunities to talk to people about it and share the gospel, and sometimes with Christians and just on how we should act, and sometimes from actual atheists and agnostics and just pagans in general, of why I don't partake it, and they always have or most of the time, some just brush it off like who cares, but most of the time they have a reaction of thoughtfulness, like, that's a perspective I hadn't heard before. So I think it's more potent to abstain.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that through and through. Yeah, avoiding Halloween. At the same time, like our group here is true cult, culture. We're trying to build something. So our goal isn't to just eradicate everything else and have nothingness.
Right.
Right. There's no vacuum, and so in place of that, I think we should, and it's a process trying to figure it out as we're rebuilding. I do think something needs to take its place, and I think we are working that in our own church. We have a Reformation Day where we celebrate and have symbols of past saints and martyrs, believers that have gone before us that we can try to emulate. As we try to emulate Paul, who emulated Christ. Yeah. So building.
Submit to God. Turn away from your sins. He has conquered death and the devil.
Nothing to fear.
Amen.
Yeah.
Glorify Him in everything you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I agree with it too. I think He's the Lord of the calendar, and the calendar has to submit to Him as well. And I agree. You can't just a solution is not to just ignore the day. We're not allowed to ignore anything, and a solution is not to. I personally think not to join into the day, and definitely not to fear the day, because, like you say, he has to submit. He already was defeated at the cross. And I think a good solution is changing it to something completely different, right? And thankfully, God in His historical economy and His plan put something on that day that says the exact anti what that day stands for, and it's the reformation of all things. So, I mean, being a pastor, I want to close with some. Can I read some Bible verses to close it out? Sure. And I think these all apply. 1 Corinthians 11:1. You already mentioned it. Paul says, "Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ." So all of these verses, I think, have some bearing about how we should deal with Halloween. Ephesians 5:1-3, "Be imitators of God, therefore, as dearly loved children, and live a life of love, just as Christ loved us and gave Himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. But among you there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality or of any kind of impurity or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people." Deuteronomy 18:9, "When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, do not learn to imitate the detestable ways of the nations there." Jeremiah 10:3, "Hear what the Lord says to you. Do not learn the ways of the nations, for the customs of the peoples are worthless." 2 Corinthians 6:14-18. Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? What harmony is there between Christ and Belial, the devil? What does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? What agreement is there between the temple of God and idols? For we are the temple of the living God. As God has said, I will live with them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. Therefore come out from them and be separate, says the Lord. Touch no unclean thing. I will receive you. I will be a father to you, and you'll be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty. Romans 12:9, hate what is evil, cling what is good. 1 Thessalonians 5:22, avoid every kind of evil. And then 3 John 3:11, do not imitate what is evil. So, yeah, I victory over the day. Christ has victory over everything. We should take victory over that day as well, I think. But
Amen.
If anybody has any questions, where should they go?
You have the email, right?
Yep, we do have the email.
I
Yeah,
forgot
we
what
do.
I forgot what it is. Send your
Yes.
questions to.
So, mail@truecult.org. So, if you have questions, comments, concerns, hostilities, go ahead and send them our way.
Are we on Meta? Are we on Facebook, Instagram?
We will be.
We will be.
Yes.
Okay.
And true cult, just so everybody knows, true culture, that's cultus is Latin for worship. And so when you say true cult, we're saying we're seeking a true worship, a true basis of all true culture. So,
Which is
not
not-
that we want to be a cult.
Which is not found in the occult.
Not
I
found in the occult.
definitely don't want to be occult.
No.
Right.
We probably don't want to be cult.
In
No.
cults either.
Yeah.
Nope. Nope.
Back to
True
its original
culture.
meaning.
Its original
Cultus.
meaning. Yep. All right.
Cool.
See you next time.
See ya.